Do you think the most dangerous things in the Sahara Desert are sandstorms and the thirst that drives people mad? What about a living, green swamp the size of an entire country, which moves on its own and swallows huge ships forever? Today, we'll sail down the Great Nile River. You'll see dried-up rivers buried deep beneath the hot sand and massive concrete walls for which people chopped ancient temples to pieces. And at the end, you'll learn about an invisible threat. The salty ocean is currently poisoning the fresh water and slowly taking over an entire country, turning green fields into a dead white wasteland. Ready to unravel the mysteries of Africa? We're starting our journey. In the 19th century, several large-scale expeditions set out deep into the African continent to solve the greatest geographical mystery of the time. They saw a full-flowing river in Egypt that sustained an entire civilization. But no one could understand where such a colossal volume of water came from. For months, the explorers pushed southward, making their way through sun-scorched wastelands where not a single drop of rain had fallen for years. Sand clogged the machinery, people lost their minds from optical illusions and constant thirst, and their food supplies dwindled before their eyes. As they advanced deeper into the desert, the water should have seeped into the ground or evaporated under the scorching sun, but the Nile continued to flow relentlessly forward, retaining its incredible power. The wide riverbed did not grow shallower, as if the great river were fed by some invisible, inexhaustible source hidden beneath the scorching sand dunes. Local legends claimed that the river originated in a gigantic underground ocean, which the gods had hidden from human eyes so that no one could control the source of life. In Europe, meanwhile, people were seriously discussing the hypothesis that the Nile was fed by mysterious inland seas in Africa that simply weren't marked on any map. There were even bold speculations that the riverbed itself possessed unique magnetic properties, acting like a giant vacuum cleaner to draw hidden moisture directly from the dry, scorching air. In reality, everything turned out to be far more complex and vast than any myth. The Nile survives in the desert thanks to a unique dual supply system that functions like a colossal natural pump. The river consists of two main branches, the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The White Nile originates far away near the equator in the region of the Great African Lakes and flows very slowly, providing the river with a stable base flow of water year-round. But the secret to survival in the summer heat lies precisely in the Blue Nile. It begins in the Ethiopian Highlands, where powerful monsoon rains fall every summer. The water crashes down the mountains with such tremendous force that it turns into a raging torrent, carrying millions of cubic meters of moisture into the desert. This seasonal surge is so powerful that it cuts right through the Sahara like a massive fire hydrant, leaving the sun no chance to evaporate all the water. But before these two streams merge into a single, unstoppable force, one of them must pass through a treacherous stretch that nearly became a silent grave for the river itself. In 1839, a massive fleet of the Egyptian ruler attempted to reach the river's source, but encountered a completely insurmountable obstacle. In what is now South Sudan, the riverbed suddenly vanished, dissolving without a trace into an endless sea of green reeds and tall papyrus. Dozens of ships found themselves trapped in a gigantic labyrinth of floating islands. The water here did not flow but stagnated, emitting a heavy stench of decay, and the air was so thick with vapors and poisonous insects that it was difficult for people to breathe. For weeks, the crews wandered in despair through this endless swamp, unable to find the main channel. Many massive ships remained there forever, crushed by the dense biomass that lived its own life, constantly moving and changing shape with each passing day. For a long time, sailors believed this place to be cursed and the boundary of the known world, beyond which humans were strictly forbidden to venture. Around campfires, they told spine-chilling tales of gigantic prehistoric creatures lurking in the murky, dark water. Many sincerely believed that the swamp itself possessed a primal intelligence. It deliberately shifted the floating islands of thorny reeds to permanently confuse uninvited guests and trap them within its domain. This ominous place is called Sud, and it is one of the largest freshwater swamps on our planet, comparable in size to a small European country. When the flow of the White Nile reaches this point, the river loses its banks and spreads uncontrollably across a vast, flat plain. Due to the scorching equatorial sun and the extremely slow current, a colossal amount of water evaporates here. About half of the White Nile's total volume simply vanishes into the atmosphere. However, the Sud acts as a giant natural sponge. During the season of torrential rains, the swamp absorbs the excess water, preventing catastrophic flooding of areas downstream. And during periods of severe drought, this green labyrinth slowly releases its stored moisture, saving the river's life. The vegetation here is so dense that it creates its own self-contained microclimate. The shade cast by the papyrus cools the surface and prevents the water from boiling in the sun. But while in the south, the river hides within green labyrinths, in the north, it conceals beneath a thick layer of sand the traces of ancient catastrophes that left indelible scars on the very stone foundation of the continent. At the end of the 20th century, scientists sent high-tech satellites equipped with special penetrating radar into the vastness of the Sahara. These sensitive instruments were capable of penetrating several meters deep into the dry sand, much like X-rays. When researchers in laboratories received and decoded the first images, they could hardly believe their eyes for a long time. Right beneath the lifeless yellow dunes, where there is now absolutely nothing but hot dust and rocks, an incredible network of colossal, dried-up riverbeds was discovered. These were the traces of enormous ancient rivers, kilometers wide, which once merged with the Nile or flowed parallel to it, forming a water system many times larger than anything we see today. The release of these radar images caused a real storm in the press. Alternative history enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists immediately claimed that these were not natural rivers at all, but the remains of grandiose artificial canals created by an incredibly advanced civilization of the past to irrigate the entire continent. There were even rumors that the Sahara was artificially dried up as a result of a massive global conflict thousands of years ago, and that these gigantic trenches are the last traces of mega projects erased by the relentless passage of time. But the radar images have revealed the truth about the so-called Paleo-Nile. About 100,000 years ago, the climate on our planet was completely different, and North Africa was an endless, blooming savanna with abundant, regular rains and dozens of full-flowing rivers. But when the climate pendulum swung and the Sahara began to inexorably turn into a dry furnace, almost all bodies of water disappeared forever. The Nile survived only thanks to a stroke of geological luck. Over time, the Ethiopian Highlands slowly rose due to the movement of tectonic plates. This uplift created a steep gradient that gave the Blue Nile's current tremendous speed and destructive force. Millions of tons of rushing water carved through the rock for millennia, cutting a deep canyon into it. Because the Nile's channel had cut so deeply into the solid rock, the water's surface was reliably protected by high banks from the drying winds of the desert. This drastically reduced the area of evaporation. The river literally hid itself in a deep trench that it had dug for itself. However, what nature had wisely created over millions of years, humans decided to completely subjugate in just a single decade, and this decision led to irreversible consequences. In the mid-20th century, the Egyptian government embarked on an engineering project of absolutely incredible scale. For millennia, the Nile had lived by its own rules. it would suddenly burst its banks, washing away entire settlements, yet at the same time bringing life to the parched land. To permanently stop the unpredictable floods and secure an endless source of electricity, an unprecedented decision was made: to dam the great river with a colossal concrete wall. This massive construction project required the relocation of tens of thousands of local residents. Moreover, unique historical monuments had to be saved. Huge ancient temples with stone statues as tall as a multi-story building had to be literally cut into thousands of blocks and carefully carried high into the mountains so they would not vanish at the bottom of the vast artificial sea that was rapidly engulfing the valley. Ordinary people watched with great anxiety and fear as the grey concrete barrier grew. In the villages, people whispered that blocking the sacred river would anger nature itself and those ancient forces that had ruled these waters since time immemorial. People sincerely believed that forcibly stopping the river's pulse would cause the land to lose its life-giving power forever. Grim rumors circulated that the water would stagnate, become toxic, and the once flourishing valley would turn into a cursed white wasteland where no plant could survive. This colossal project was named the Aswan Dam, and from an engineering standpoint, it was an unqualified global triumph. Behind the concrete barrier, a reservoir nearly 500 kilometers long was formed. The country gained cheap electricity and forgot forever about devastating floods and devastating droughts. But along with the excess water, the dam also brought to a complete halt something no less important: the famous Nile silt. For millennia, the turbulent flow carried millions of tons of dark, mineral-rich soil from the mountains of Ethiopia. This invaluable silt settled in an even layer on the fields, acting as a powerful and completely free natural fertilizer. Now, year after year, all this priceless cargo accumulates at the bottom of the reservoir, unable to break through the dam. Deprived of this natural replenishment, farmers are forced to use thousands of tons of aggressive chemical fertilizers, which are gradually poisoning the soil. The river has been stripped of its main magic, but the problem with silt pales in comparison to what is happening today far to the south, where the Nile first springs forth. A few years ago, a new massive structure appeared in recent satellite images of Ethiopia, causing neighboring countries to literally sound the alarm at the highest levels. Right in the channel of the very Blue Nile, which supplies the river with the lion's share of its water, a new colossal dam began to rise rapidly. This time, the massive construction project was not taking place in the safe lower reaches, but at the very source, where the vital flow capable of breaking through the Sahara is formed. Diplomatic relations in the region have become as tense as a stretched string. Endless and extremely difficult negotiations have begun, for whoever controls this switch holds the fate of more than 100 million people living downstream in their hands. The media instantly erupted with alarming conspiracy theories. Many influential figures claimed that this was not merely a power plant, but a genuine geopolitical weapon. It was reported that the dam was built specifically to shut off the valve at the right moment and blackmail the countries dependent on the oasis. The press published dire predictions. If the Ethiopians fill their reservoir too quickly, the Nile's bed will simply dry up in a matter of months, exposing cracked silt, and the once mighty pride of Africa will turn into a pitiful string of foul-smelling, drying puddles. This colossal structure is known as the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. By design, it is a purely economic hydroelectric project intended to lift millions of people out of darkness and poverty. However, the main problem lies in the inexorable physics of the process. For the giant turbines to start spinning, a reservoir the size of a small sea must be filled. That is, tens of cubic kilometers of water. And while this water accumulates for years in the reservoir high in the mountains, it physically cannot reach Egypt. Moreover, creating such a massive artificial lake under the scorching sun means that every year, millions of tons of water will simply evaporate into the atmosphere, permanently disrupting the river's balance. Engineers promise to fill the reservoir as slowly and carefully as possible, but global climate change is making rainfall unpredictable. As a result, the volume of fresh water flowing through the Sahara toward the final stretch is rapidly shrinking, and this has already triggered a quiet but fatal chain reaction at the very end of the journey. In recent decades, ordinary farmers living in the far north of the continent, in the picturesque Nile Delta, have faced an inexplicable and truly terrifying phenomenon. Their bountiful crops began to suddenly wither and die, and the land that had generously fed entire empires for centuries became covered in a thick white crust. When people tried to drink water from their old trusted wells, they spat it out in horror. The water had become unbearably bitter and salty. The fertile soil began to literally crumble to dust right in their hands, and the contours of the coastline began to change noticeably. It seemed as though some invisible, immense force was slowly, centimeter by centimeter, gnawing away at patches of flourishing land, pulling them under the cold water. Concerned locals began whispering that the Mediterranean Sea had been poisoned by heavy chemicals from industrial plants, and now the vengeful water was destroying their fields. Others seriously believed that the ancient earth simply could not bear the weight and was sinking under the immense burden of the modern megacities that had been built. Supposedly, giant voids had formed beneath the cities, and now seawater was greedily filling these cavities straight from beneath the ground. This destructive process is known in hydrology as saltwater intrusion, and it is a direct consequence of our crude interference in the river's life. The Nile Delta is, in essence, a piece of land that the river itself has deposited over millennia from that very Ethiopian silt. The silt constantly pushed the sea further and further back, but after the construction of all these concrete dams, the fresh building material stopped coming in. Deprived of a constant supply of new soil, the delta began to subside and slowly erode under the constant pounding of the waves. At the same time, global sea levels are rising inexorably due to global warming. As a result, the salty waters of the Mediterranean Sea are launching an aggressive advance. They penetrate deep into the ground, contaminating the freshwater aquifers. The soil becomes saturated with corrosive salt, making it impossible for even the hardiest crops to grow, and the wells turn into poison. The great river loses the strength of its current at the very end of its course, no longer able to hold back the ocean's onslaught. And the sea is slowly, but absolutely inexorably, swallowing up one of the most fertile and ancient territories on our planet. We have come an incredible journey together. We have seen the raging waterfalls of the Ethiopian Highlands and the green labyrinth of the Sud, where time stands still. We descended to ancient radars in the scorching sands of the Sahara, saw how concrete mountains block the planet's arteries, and watched as the ocean slowly corrodes the coastline with salt. For centuries, the Nile survived in this hellish heat, only thanks to nature's incredibly complex, finely tuned balance. It was saved by powerful seasonal rains and a deep stone channel carved out over millennia. But the modern world has proven far more complex. We take pride in having learned to erect colossal concrete walls, capable of halting the force of centuries in a matter of seconds. We believe we have subdued the elements. Yet every such intervention brutally disrupts the fragile natural equilibrium. A single decision made in boardrooms transforms flourishing, millennia-old oases into lifeless, salt-scorched wastelands. We are changing the physical map of our planet much faster than we can grasp the true cost of our actions, and the history of Africa's great river is the most vivid and terrifying proof of this. If you're interested in delving into these mysteries and want to learn what other hidden mechanisms govern our world, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Many more stories lie ahead that will forever change your perception of the things you take for granted.